Good evening, you're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. Hong Kong swelters in the hottest July day ever on record, with the temperature reaching 39 degrees in certain areas. Inbound travelers can soon fill in health declaration forms before departure to save time upon arrival. And Canadian sprinters reign supreme in the men's relay. Hong Kong has just experienced the hottest July day on record, with the temperature in certain areas reaching a boiling 39 degrees. While many turn up the air conditioner, try sparing a thought for those living in inadequate housing. Janice Low reports.
It's generally a nice idea to beat the summer heat by visiting the beach. While Shekov Beach remained packed today, others chose to stay indoors on what turned out to be the hottest July day ever. The observatory registered a maximum temperature of 36.1 degrees Celsius at its Tsim Sha Tsui headquarters this afternoon, beating the previous record set in 1968 by 0.4 degrees. Regardless of the month, it was also the third hottest day since the agency began keeping records in 1884. Further inland in Changshui, the mercury even hit a whopping 39 degrees.
The observatory expects the temperature to hover around 34 degrees for the rest of the month. But the heat will be much more intolerable for those living in inadequate housing, according to a concerned group.
While many chose to stay indoors, the Society for Community Organization found out that this may not be an option for the underprivileged. Temperatures at subdivided units or cage homes could reach 40 degrees, its investigation has found. Many of these dwellings do not come with air conditioners, or even if they do, the residents cannot afford to turn them on, SOCO said. As a result, some were forced to abandon their homes and sleep on the streets. Another problem, the group said, was that many landlords overcharge on electricity as there are no standalone energy meters for each unit. This is despite a recent legislation which bans the practice on top of capping rent increases. SOCO urged the government to assist with this matter instead of relying on the tenants to talk to the landlords.
I think even later, even for the new subdivided flats, and they should have a legislation to request they must have an individual meter for the household. Otherwise, I think it's quite hard to just use the encouragement, and it's quite slow process.
Xi also slammed authorities for the lack of public education on the new law and the lax enforcement of it. Janice Low, HKIBC.
The government has taken a baby step in streamlining its cumbersome inbound quarantine procedures. Starting on Thursday, inbound travelers can choose to complete an online electronic health declaration form before boarding a flight to the SAR. This will eliminate the need to fill in paper forms on arrival. Once travelers submit required information such as vaccination proof and quarantine hotel booking details, they will receive a QR code. The code will be valid for 96 hours and will be verified by airline staff at the check-in counter. Depending on the results, the trial will become mandatory next month. Those hoping for COVID to go away soon may be disappointed after a medical expert believes the virus will remain in the community for another year or two. Dean of the Medical School at Chinese University, Francis Chan, also predicted daily infections to exceed 10,000 again.
Taking to the airwaves this morning, the Dean of Chinese University's Medical School, Francis Chan, warned that daily COVID cases in Hong Kong could return to 5 digits in the foreseeable future. His prediction came after infections nearly doubled since the beginning of the month. Chan called on the public to do their part to avoid burdening the public healthcare system.
I believe the most important thing is that for public hospital, we have limited number of beds, so we can only cater for those with more severe illnesses or those with complications. Therefore, I emphasize that we need to put a lot of preventive measures in terms of receiving booster injections and those who haven't completed the vaccination to receive the vaccination as soon as possible.
A teaching hospital run by Chinese university has already set aside wards to receive COVID patients if public hospitals are overwhelmed. Expecting COVID to be around for another year or two, Chen felt it was time for authorities to review and adjust anti-epidemic measures so people's lives return to normal. He was also critical over what he felt was the government's laid-back attitude on patients suffering long COVID. He said both the Center for Health Protection and the hospital authority had shirked responsibility on providing assistance to people with post-recovery symptoms. The university is now conducting research on the condition, with preliminary findings expected in 3 months.
Chen's prediction may just be on point as COVID infections exceeded 4,000 for the 4th straight day. Hospital Authority Chief Manager Larry Lee revealed that children's quarantine wards are now 48% occupied. Pediatric intensive care units at public hospitals are also half full. More patients are also detected through compulsory testing, days after authorities indicated they will step up the frequency of the exercise. The Center for Health Protection reported 4,250 cases today, 186 of which were imported. COVID took away the lives of 8 patients aged between 75 and 103. The MTR Corporation has promised to install safety alarms at its disabled toilets after an elderly man was found only hours after he allegedly collapsed and died. Motion sensors will now be gradually fitted at over 90 station toilets for the disabled. The alarm will set off when no movement is detected in the cubicle for a prolonged period of time. The railway operator once again apologized for the blunder at Hongham Station last Wednesday. But the family of the 66-year-old man found it unacceptable that MTR staff took nearly 4 hours to locate him. With the help of the Democratic Party, they are now demanding a formal inquiry. Overseas, a deal between Moscow and Kyiv to allow vital grain exports from Ukraine now seems to be going down the drain. That's because Russian missiles have landed in the southern port of Odessa just hours after the agreement was reached. At least 6 explosions were heard in the area. A military spokesman confirmed that 2 missiles hit the port's infrastructure, while 2 others were shot down by air defense systems. The latest attack also came amid a visit to Kyiv by a U.S. congressional delegation. The head of the group urged the Western world to rally behind Ukraine.
And their decision to bomb Odessa less than 24 hours after an agreement was reached to help not just Ukraine, but all the parts of the world that are desperate for that food, I hope the world will unite in condemning Russia and recognize, again, stopping Putin is the key to protecting Ukraine, protecting Eastern Europe, and protecting the world.
In the United States, a state of emergency has been declared in parts of California after a wildfire is raging out of control. Thousands of residents near Yosemite National Park were told to evacuate.
By about 15-20 minutes ago and told us that everybody's got to go. About 4 o'clock the power went out and the fire's been coming towards us faster and faster.
I'm hoping that they're able to get it out before it damages anybody's homes, but this doesn't look good.
Firefighters are struggling to contain the fire, which has burned nearly 5,000 hectares of land since it started on Friday. Hot, dry weather and drought conditions accelerated the spread of the blaze. Temperatures in Mariposa County hit 35.5 degrees Celsius this weekend. As if the COVID pandemic did not have a big enough toll on people's lives, the World Health Organization has declared the recent outbreak of monkeypox a global emergency.
WHO's assessment is that the risk of monkeypox is moderate globally and in all regions, except in the European region, where we assess the risk is high. Although I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern, for the moment, this is an outbreak that's concentrated among men who have sex with men, especially those with multiple sexual partners.
A global emergency is the body's highest level of alert, although the designation does not necessarily mean the disease is particularly transmissible or lethal. But at the same time, there is a possibility that the virus could spread further, and a globally coordinated response would be needed. Pope Francis is set to kick off a week-long visit to Canada. The first papal visit in 2 decades will focus on reconciliation and recognition of the harms done to Indigenous children forced to attend church-run residential schools.
I believe that there are some who probably have the perspective that there's nothing to be grateful for. The Pope needs to do this. We shouldn't be thanking him. And I'm not thanking him per se, but we weren't going to go and grab him by force and drag him to Canada and hold a gun to his head until he said he was sorry. He's freely choosing to do this.
When you talk about it as a penitential pilgrimage, he is deeply seized by the fact that terrible things have happened in the past, perpetrated in many cases by people who were representative of the church.
At least 150,000 Indigenous children were taken from their families and thrown into residential schools over more than a century. Many were subjected to abuse, rape, and malnutrition, with some calling the system cultural genocide. The 85-year-old Pope will meet Indigenous leaders and school survivors and deliver an open-air mass. Finally, tonight, China has taken another ambitious step forward in its quest of establishing a permanent presence in space.
3、2、1。
It launched the second of the 3 modules required for the construction of the Tiangong Space Station. At 2:22 p.m., the Wentian Laboratory module set off from the Wenchang Launch Center on Hainan Island. It was taken to orbit by a Long March 5B rocket. The final piece of the puzzle, Mengtian, is scheduled for takeoff in October. If all goes well, China's permanent outpost in space will be fully operational by the end of the year. On to the weather now. Temperatures tomorrow will peak at 36 degrees. The sizzling conditions will remain for the rest of the month. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Sunday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Thanks for watching. Good night.